After graduating, instead of working for a bank, which is what they wanted, I went to be a receptionist at a real estate development firm. And that just made them so angry because they're like, I didn't pay for 4 years of university at UBC for you to be a receptionist. Eventually, they told me that, if I quit my job at SAP and I tried my own business and I failed, I could always go back home. I felt like they only said that because they needed to let me go and do my own thing and fail on my own. And, then I would give that up and get a real job. But then that never happened. However, every time they came to visit in Canada, the first question they would ask is, when are you going to get a real job? I love freedom. Like, I don't wake up in the mornings, and every job requires you to wake up in the morning. I like staying up at night. I'm more of a night owl. I'm more productive at night. That kind of freedom, and to be able to go on a holiday or just travel for, a wedding or a party whenever I want to, you lose everything. Like you lose all of that freedom as an employee. And I remember my first job, I was selling real estate, and this guy in my office, he was so good at selling real estate, but I wasn't very good. And he told me that, I have to detach myself from the sale. I have to detach myself emotionally from the customer. And like when they say no to the house, they're not saying no to me as a person. They're saying no to the transaction. How can you not take that personally? But it's about how long you let that impact you. You need to set an expiry on your feelings so that you can move forward.
So this is a Second Act podcast. One more time, I have a very amazing, dynamic woman by my side. A mutual friend introduced. So I'm very thankful to Vikram. Vikram, thank you. This is for you for getting Melissa introduced to me, because of course she is the right person to be on the Second Act podcast. So Melissa, Kwan, welcome. This is a platform where through a story of yours, through a second act of yours, which I describe as either a higher purpose or something that really reinvented you many times, this is the platform where one story can just shift so many lives. And those are the kind of stories I'm looking for. You are a storyteller yourself. You are a 3-time bootstrapper. I'm very excited to know all about your bootstrapping journeys and entrepreneurship. Many, things that you have done. So a lot about that. And of course, the ewebinar space that you hold, because that is the space that can reach so many hearts at one time, so many people at one time. And also, like you say, you are in the business of helping people to keep their own time for themselves. So welcome. And thank you for joining in from Amsterdam.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Melissa, am I saying it right? You are. Yeah. It's Melissa.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Melissa, tell me, if I start from your bootstrapping journey, and you said 3 times bootstrapping. So what are the 3 verticals or the 3 times that you tried something, and how did that go? And which one are you at right now?
Yeah, so I'm working on ewebinar right now, which is my 3rd company. My first 2 companies lasted, 10 years, and they were both in real estate tech. Before that, though, I worked for a company called SAP selling software, and then I always had kind of odd jobs selling, everything under the sun. So I feel like I've had many different acts. But as an adult, I guess as a founder, I've had 3 companies. ewebinar is a software company as well, but in a completely different space.
Wow, so wonderful to know. So I know, Melissa, that you come from a conservative Chinese family. I think they don't say just like that China and India are sisters. And I think I totally believe it, because also it is the mindset of parents, which probably, for women especially, they just tell you that you must do these 3 things. Either you become a doctor, you enter and take up like a course which can sustain your family life and your professional life, something which is just about stable, so that you can balance. So I'm sure that you went through the same thing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one is like every Asian parent or mom wants you to marry well and marry rich and
Yes.
ideally marry early to a family that they can be proud of, telling their friends. So I mean, that's very prevalent, in the Chinese culture as well. I guess my parents didn't give me that much pressure, but on that particular thing, but they definitely wanted me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes from a good place, right? I think your parents, just want you to have a better life than them. I don't have kids, so I'm just guessing from all the lectures I've gotten. But the second best thing is you become a professional, which is like very stable. You have a nice paycheck, a respectable job, and that they can be proud of, right? And they could also just stop worrying. I didn't do any of those things. And I guess it was like easier for me not to do those things because I was living in Canada at that time by myself. My parents were in Hong Kong. So even though, there was some pressure there, they weren't beside me. So It was much easier for me to just kind of do what I wanted. And, after I graduated, it was either like get a job to sustain myself or I had to move back to Hong Kong in with them. So I was just doing like anything I could to not do that. Because at that point, I've been living alone for many years since university. So I just basically did exactly what they didn't want me to do, which was job hop into different kind of sales-led roles, not, anything professional. I remember after graduating, instead of working for a bank, which is what they wanted, I went to be a receptionist at a real estate development firm because I wanted to get into real estate. And that just made them so angry because they're like, I didn't pay for 4 years of university in UBC for you to be a receptionist. Right. But I knew what I was doing. Like I didn't have a background in real estate. I wanted to understand how buildings were built and how they were sold before they were built. I was living in Vancouver at the time and selling apartments before they're built was a thing. And that was the role that I wanted to get into so I could learn the business and, see who was buying, see how they sold and read all the files. So I knew what I was doing, but it was just very hard to explain to them what I was actually doing because they thought I was just messing around. So I didn't have to go back to Hong Kong and live with them. And, and eventually I just jumped around a little bit. And my last job was at SAP where I was selling software. And that was kind of my first foray into technology. But I always wanted to start my own business. I just never had the know-how. I didn't have the experience. My parents aren't entrepreneurs. So even though as a kid, I always tried to do things with my friends on the side, like it wasn't like a focused project. But after a year at SAP, I wanted to finally, do something of my own. And that was when I quit like 13 years ago.
So is entrepreneurship common from Asia, from the parts that you come from, either Hong Kong or China? Is it common for women especially to get into entrepreneurship?
I'm not sure just because I'm not submersed in that culture. I immigrated to Canada when I was 9. But I would imagine so, right? Like, I mean, Asia people are very entrepreneurial. But I guess I don't know if there's like as much of a men and women divide as I feel there is, in the West. And definitely like when I spent some time in China, I didn't feel like there was that big of a divide. Like I actually saw a lot of women CEOs, maybe because it's communist. I'm actually not sure. But at least in my family, it wasn't encouraged because they didn't understand what that was. I think your parents just want you to be a bit more successful than them. My mom never worked. My dad was in the same job for like over 40 years. He worked from the bottom. So just being your own boss was something that was just so foreign. And I think especially in Asia, you equate success to money. And when you start a business, you don't have any money. So even though I was trying really hard, they didn't see that I was winning. They didn't see that I was successful because I never had any money. And I always had to ask them to bail me out. And they bailed out my credit card a few times, enough that they didn't talk to me for 2 years. So I like, at least in my family, it was just not a thing that they wanted me to do. And I think eventually they told me that, if I quit my job at SAP and I tried my own business and I failed, I could always go back home. I felt like I had support from them, but looking back, I felt like they only said that because they needed to let me go and do my own thing and fail on my own. And, then I would give that up and get a real job. But then that never happened. However, every time they came to visit in Canada, the first question they would ask is, when are you going to get a real job?
So it is, of course, entrepreneurship is not everybody's piece of cake. It is super tough. And I am experiencing it very recently because I quit my corporate job after 26 years and I started something completely different than what I was doing. And I totally relay you when you say that money is the last thing that you actually make. Success is something else that we define, And so what kept you going with it after one thing to the other? You said this is your third company that you are actually working for yourself. So what kept you going?
I mean, there was definitely a chip on my shoulder, when your parents and, people don't think you can do it, you want to do it. Like less so much to prove them wrong, because I don't really derive energy from validation, but you just want to win so badly because, people think you're going to lose. So you want to win. And that's for me, that's not for someone else. But I love freedom. I don't wake up in the mornings, and every job requires you to wake up in the morning. I like staying up at night. I'm more of a night owl. I'm more productive at night. I like to have, 2.5, 3-day weekends, right? I don't want to go and get up early on Monday, that kind of freedom, and to be able to go on a holiday or just travel for, a wedding or a party whenever I want to. You lose everything. You lose all of that freedom as an employee. And nowadays you can work remote, but 15 years ago, that's not common, right? You get your 2-3 week holidays and that's it. Right. So I just really hated being under someone else's management, or under someone else's roof. Right. So I think that was the thing that kept me going, was I wanted full control over my life. And I was willing to sacrifice comfort and money for that, but also understanding that I'm recognizing that I was very young and I didn't have any dependents. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a relationship for a really long time. So that allowed me to do everything that I wanted on my timeline. That allowed me to suffer on my own and not bring someone else into that picture. So I do recognize that that's a privilege as well. And I'm not sure, knowing how hard it is, how people with families, especially families with young kids, actually do this, because at that point you really need the income. I didn't need the income, right? I could survive on very little money.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing as well. But I started I think I started my first company when I was 27. I think I should have started it 5 years early.
It's always like that, when you look back, it says, I wish I had done this. I also feel I should have quit at least 10-15 years earlier. I would have made something. But there is this thing about that you have to work relentlessly for a couple of years, and then you're known as an entrepreneur. You probably become so resilient, and then people know you for your work, and then the money starts coming. In India, they say that if you have 1,000 sleepless nights as an entrepreneur, then you know that you're in the right track and you're not retracting back. So do you have something like this also in your own space, to know that, okay,
yeah,
I've done 15 years?
I mean, I think you have to work hard for 2 years. I think that's a huge understatement. I think you have to work hard for at least 5, minimum, to learn the ropes and learn how to work with people, learn how to hire even contractors, right? Learn the people in your industry, make friends with them, build an audience. I think I was in my previous 2 companies for 10 years and they were in the same industry. So things really didn't start to pick up until year 5 or 6. And I had to go to a lot of events, lots of conferences, right? Set up booths, lots of cold calling, cold email, meeting people in the office, flying around. That was a lot of hard work just to put myself on the map. And then at some point, people are like, okay, this person's not going away. Maybe I should look at what they're doing.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of those years, we were trying to build a product, but nobody was paying for it. So we spent a lot of those years just iterating on something that the first person would pay for. And during those years, you get yourself in a lot of debt, you aren't living well, you're paying every paycheck that comes in, it funnels out, right, to pay someone else. In fact, like my LinkedIn post today was about, other founders asking me, how do you fund your startups? It's like, well, you do whatever it takes, right? You make money, you take side projects, you get government grants, you borrow money, you have credit cards, you take some friends and family investments, right? Like you do whatever it takes if you want this bad enough. And luckily, I had an exit in my previous company, which allowed me to start my third one with more comfort. But I also know a lot of founders that didn't come out the other end, right? I know a lot of founders that lost their marriages and, had to get, like, they're so tired that they had to go back to corporate. And that's where they're staying now because they just don't have it in them to start another one. So I know that I'm, one of the lucky ones and definitely grateful for that. But yeah, it was definitely not until year 5 or 6 where it started to pick up. And then it was probably around year 9 where I sold that company.
Oh, wow. So has the Melissa of, let's say, yesteryears changed to who she is today in taking chances even boldly and putting money behind the right stuff and like not getting feared with, what will happen? Have you changed over time as well?
I mean, I think I was a lot more fearless before. I think that, there's a moment when experience actually hinders you, right? Like when I was doing everything for the first time, I didn't know how hard it was. I didn't know how painful it would be. So I just go and do it, even though it was stupid. I didn't see the stupidity. But now I know certain decisions are dumb or I shouldn't do that. But it also stops me from taking bigger risk. It stops me from going for the bigger deals or, doing things that are on a larger scale. But I'm also tired. Like I've been doing this for so long that I feel like I've earned some comfort, right? So I think in terms of like, how much risk that I take today, like definitely a lot less than I did before. Like I was 32 and I moved to New York with no money. Like I sold my car in Vancouver, gave up my apartment, and instead of paying off my credit card debt, I invested in this co-living project.
Wow.
Right. Like I was okay not having money in my account ever. And, but that was because I was in my 20s and I was always optimistic. So I always thought I was investing in myself and investing in something else. And like, definitely that's true, but I would never invest every dollar that I have now in something. Right. So, but in terms of like, positive changes, like I work a lot less because I'm a lot more strategic. I know where I can spend my time so I can actually get return versus trying 10 things and 9.5 of those things don't work. Yeah. Right. So because I'm more strategic, I'm able to have, my weekends and evenings and, more balanced work hours. And, because I'm able to attract better talent, we're also able to get more things done faster and make less mistakes. And all of that comes with experience.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm like, relating it back to my story when you were speaking, but of course I'm too new in this journey. So if you had to tell people today from your experience, would you tell them take a plunge when you're still younger to be an entrepreneur? Or you think that experience, collect some money, think about it, be strategic about what you do, and then take a plunge?
I mean, I think being an entrepreneur is not something you become overnight. I think it's just someone that you are. And some people uncover that sooner than others. But I would say that if you feel the burning desire to be an entrepreneur and take control of your own fate, that you should do it today. Like, why wait? And nowadays with the gig economy and how you can hire anyone anywhere in the world through maybe an Upwork or through a network, like it's so much easier to start something. And you don't have to start a tech company right away, or like, a restaurant right away, right? You can start from your own kitchen and sell things on Instagram, right? You can make a 1-hour course and sell it on Gumroad. Or you can even make beautiful PDF playbooks and sell that on Gumroad for $10, right? Like a founder of any size is still a founder. But I think if you get the feeling or experience earning your first $100 or like getting your first 100 customers, that feeling is really addictive. Once you know that it is possible, then it allows you to think about, hey, what would life be like if I only worked half time? I would definitely not encourage anyone that don't have the financial means to quit their job cold turkey. There's just too many ways to make money nowadays to get a feel for it before you actually have to take the plunge. And even with my COO, who is basically a third co-founder, like he was the first person that helped me on eWebinar, but he lives in New York. He was getting paid like $250,000 a year with benefits in the US. I can't pay him that kind of money.
Of course.
So he was helping us like 1 day a week on evenings and weekends for like a good, I think, 2.5 years. And I told him I would never ask you to quit your job until I know that this is worth it, until I know that this is worth your time. And I didn't do that until like 2.5 years into the company. And we've only been around for 4 years. Right. So, and he is like an integral part of our company. Like I would not have holidays without this guy, but he can't afford it. So sometimes you just have to, again, kind of do what it takes and like work yourself up to that point before you actually quit your job.
So then how did actually this idea of eWebinar came to you? Did you?
So just to give some context, just to give some context, we turn videos into webinars to save people from doing the same live webinar over and over again. So you can imagine like demos, onboarding, training, thought leadership, like any one of those live webinars that you wish you could be doing every single day because they work so well for you. We help you do that so you never have to be in front of a camera. This was a problem that I live with myself in my previous startup because I was bootstrapped, because I had such a small company. I think the most headcount we ever had was 6 people. So I was everything except for code. I was like sales, accountant, PM, like trainer, customer success. So I was doing all of those webinars for customers. And the more customers we got, the more they wanted me to do. But it doesn't matter, especially if you're running a tech company, it doesn't matter how many you do. It's never enough because people don't show up. 100 people sign up and like 9 people show up and then 4 will drop off before you finish. And then your customer wants you to do it again and again. And also at that point, I was nomading around the world. So I was also doing these repetitive webinars on different time zones. So I always imagined this product that would do my job for me so I could go and have fun. Because that's really what my life is about. Like, I guess if you talk about second act, that's really what my life is about. My first act was about working super hard. And my second is about living and working at the same time, but really optimizing the things that I have to do. So I just really wanted this product to exist so I didn't have to work so much at odd hours. So after my last company was acquired, this was the idea that just kept coming back to me. And I kept searching on the internet for something that would solve that problem. And there just wasn't something that would solve it in the way that I wanted. Like there were like products that were out there, but they weren't built very nicely. It was like the difference between an old scrappy car and like a Ferrari. Like I wanted to use a Ferrari and that didn't exist. So 2 months after that company was acquired, I wanted to solve this problem once and for all, because I also knew from spending this many years in the business that I wasn't the only one experiencing this problem. Like a lot of my friends, especially people with like tech companies or insurance companies or real estate companies, anyone who's selling a product and wants their customers to stay, have this problem. So that was kind of where the idea came from. It wasn't like an overnight thing. It was like kind of a mulling over 5 years, like, why doesn't this thing exist? And meanwhile, all these companies like Zoom, Facebook, and all these companies were pouring money into live broadcasts, but they weren't solving the biggest problem of live broadcasts, which was scaling the live broadcast, but not like uploading a video on YouTube because you lose all the engagement, you lose the chat. Like they're not scaling the video delivery in a way that is also engaging and preserve the communication between you and the customer.
Yeah. So do you think that it's still relevant after 4 years, or do you keep upgrading this product to make it more relevant? Because now the season is of coaches, and like different things are coming, every day. So it's difficult to keep up with itself.
I mean, we are only becoming more remote. I think we are only becoming more selfish with our time, which means you can't tell me when I can attend your training. I want to attend it at my time, and I want to have it when I want it. And I want to reach out to you when I'm available, not when you're available. So I think it's interesting, right? Because if you think about like just how we operate as a consumer, right? Like if I told you, you can only watch your favorite show next Tuesday at 11, Netflix doesn't exist. It doesn't work anymore. Right? Like we've progressed as a society on how we want to consume video content. However, when it comes to business, we're like, oh no, like you're my customer. So you have to join my webinar on my time zone even though you have a busy day. Right? It just like we've progressed it as a consumer in B2C, but we haven't progressed as a consumer in B2B. So I think there is some catching up to do. And it's not so much a matter of like if that will happen. It's like when that will happen. Yeah. But that also presents a huge opportunity for companies that recognize this gap to deliver their material, deliver their content closer to how their customers actually want it, right? So the whole idea of like, oh, I sign up for a webinar and only 10% show up and that's normal. Well, that might be normal today, but that doesn't have to be your reality, right? How do you deliver content so that 70% of people show up and not 10, right? So that's the solution that we want to provide. So I think the world will only go more and more that way. And when they do, we'll be here.
Yeah, I just love this concept, actually. I just love it. And you're right. I mean, for me as well, because I now attend a lot of learning sessions because of my own work. It's good to see what people are doing and how they're doing and what kind of tools they're using. So yeah, this convenience of my own time when I want to do it is super relevant. But technology is also changing. I mean, one day there's AI, then there is some metaverse, there is something else, there is crypto, so it's so dynamic right now. What's your next step?
I just want to retire. people are like, oh, you started 3 companies, you must be a serial entrepreneur. It's like, no, I'm working for financial freedom, right? I'm working for financial freedom. I want to travel. I want to spend more time with my friends. I want to try different foods. I want to see more stuff. Like I want to sleep more. I want to watch more TV. Like I want to do all the fun stuff, right? Like building a company for me is something that I know how to do, right? It's something that I'm good at, something that I've done, but it really is the thing that can help me buy the freedom that I want at the end of my life, right? So I don't want to be working forever. Like I see myself working on this maybe for the next 5 years, maybe less, I don't know. But this is like working is not something that brings me as much joy as just having fun and spending more time with my friends.
Yeah, so I also hear that you do a lot of these forest trips, and then like you say, I'm like more of a nomad. So I mean, what do you exactly do most of the time? You are experiencing financial freedom, as I can see already. So what is that for you?
Well, I don't have it in the sense that in the way that I want it, right? So when I think about, financial freedom, and the thing that I'm working towards is I want to be able to travel without looking for cheap flights. I want to go tomorrow, and I don't want that to restrict me. Right. I want to go to any restaurant, stay in any Airbnb, any hotel, and not worry about how much we're paying. I want to have, a bigger apartment, right? We live in a 1-bedroom now, but it is in the best area of Amsterdam, but, I want to double that. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense of financial freedom, like we don't have today. But we definitely live pretty well. We can do most of the things that we want to do, but when we travel, it's like, we always look for a place we haven't been to. So, next week we're going to Jordan. Tomorrow we're going to Georgia. Right. But, it's easy because I'm in Amsterdam. We travel a lot for festivals and parties, and things like that. So I would just like to do more of that exploration. We spent 6 months in Asia in the wintertime, but there's a lot of countries that we haven't really explored a lot in. Like I've never been to Korea. So ultimately, I want to be able to do a lot more of that. But also, as the company becomes more profitable, we will be able to do more of that while working on this as well on the side.
I think that's all of us are striving for the same thing, aren't we? I mean, of course, everybody would love to have this financial freedom by their sides, and to, like you said, not to wait to see, okay, when are the flights getting cheaper, or when can I actually travel or not. And I wish you all the best. And may you also develop like a ewebinar where you speak all about it and then advise people what they can do smartly to lead a very financially freedom life. Are you thinking on those lines?
I mean, one day maybe, but that would have to be my third act. I'm not sure if I have another one in me, but I mean, the biggest advice I would have for people is like, don't wait, right? Because I think a lot of people, they say, oh, I wish I could travel, or I wish I traveled when I was younger and now I can't. Like, you don't have to travel for 6 months. You could do it for a week. You could do it for 2 weeks, right? Like if you have the time and the means to do some of that, like you don't have to wait until you retire, right? Like your goal doesn't have to be in the future. And that's the way that I've always lived my life, is like, if I wanted to do something, I would just go and do it. Like my idea to execution time is actually very short.
So Melissa, what are some things that have always stood by you? And what are some things that you've tried to move away from your life, whether it's a trait, a value, a person, a book, a quotation, anything which helps you today and which you feel that, no, I think I just decided to give it up because it's better to get rid of such things?
I think what's always stood by me, I mean, in terms of, I guess, my life and also my work, is having integrity. I will always choose integrity over anything else, like including revenue. Perfect example of that is we could be making a lot more money right now if we copied features from our competitors and have, like, if anyone knows, an evergreen webinar or have seen an automated webinar before, they've got like features that trick people into thinking it's live when it's not. So like a fake counter or like a fake chat conversation to make you, feel like there's scarcity, like it's false scarcity. And then it makes you feel like you have to buy. Like it just feels really sleazy. And we made an early decision to never do that, to never have somebody come into eWebinar and feel tricked. And while we know that if we had those things, we could win customers from other products, it was more important for us to never be seen as a company that helps trick people. So, and because of that, we lose people every day. People don't convert, but that's okay. Right. And, down to how I live my life is I'm never late, ever. And if I am late, I will tell the person I'm meeting as soon as I know I'm late that I'm going to be late and how long I'm going to be late. But that's like not common sense, I think, to a lot of people. But for me, like, I want to be known for the person that is reliable, that is trustworthy, and that has integrity. So I think as a principle, that is something that has always stuck by me. And I think I picked it up from my dad. And as far as like a book that's always stuck with me is The Alchemist. If anyone has not read it, you should definitely read it. It's like the quintessential like story of someone going out to find their dreams. And, it's just about his journey and the things that he learns along the way. Like, it's not a business book, but for me, it's uplifted me in different phases of my life in different ways. I don't read. This is the only book that I've read 20 times. Really? And every time I read it, I pick up a different thing from it, depending on where I am in my life, which is why I love it.
Wow, so beautiful. I've read it and I think I will pick up the book again and then reread it and see how it relates to me today. And you're so right that books are, actually doing that to us when, they become so relatable to the phase of life that you're in. And most books do that, to be honest. And you said you don't read, so it is a big one for alchemists, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I work so much anyway. That's the thing. People are like, "Oh, what are you reading?" I'm like, I don't read.
Alchemists.
Like, I mean, if I have free time, I watch a lot of TV. I go out a lot. I see my friends a lot, and I sign up for a lot of newsletters. So I read a lot of online content, but I don't pick up a book.
You know, your LinkedIn articles, which I have been following off late ever since I think we connected over LinkedIn, they are superbly easy, human, they touch a chord, they speak, at least they speak to me, they go right inside. And it seems like you're having a conversation. It's like that easy, you know. So I just find them so beautiful. And I say, oh my goodness, because you know, it's difficult from another culture that you perceive somebody to be from another culture whom you feel or might not be feeling this way, or at least if they're feeling, they're not taught to be expressive this way. So it comes like a whiff of fresh air, to be honest. And it also tells me how we perceive people so differently sometimes. So how
Yeah, I mean, I think like, I mean, culture doesn't, I mean, in some ways culture defines us, but it doesn't so much define how an entrepreneur feels, right? I think the things that I share on LinkedIn are all experiences and stories that happened to me in the last 13 years. And I realized like there's a lot of content out there on LinkedIn, especially that are just like rah, right? It's just like, look at me, I'm amazing. Here's a motivational quote and you should do this. You should do this. Here's my playbook. That stuff doesn't work for me. Like it might work if I wasn't, you know, an Asian girl that looks 12, but like I realize that like the only content that I put out that has engagement that people are interested in is like personal stories. So I try to share as much of that as possible and not come from a position of authority, because I don't feel like I can go and like teach people. But it's more from a position of like, this is what has happened to me. This is what I've learned from it. And this is normal. Like that's kind of the feel, the vibe that I'm going for.
No, so one of the posts talked about validation and how there are so many people giving you advice of how much wrong you're doing, or what a lousy concept you're coming out with, or the way that you're showing up on social media. And like, you know, I was told the way that I'm doing my videos at one point in time, what are you trying to do? Do you think this will even work? Nobody will even relate to you. So, and then I got pushed back, to be honest. I got pushed back and thought, oh my goodness, everybody's watching me. I don't know what they're going to say. But then something inside me just sparked and said, okay, from today, I will do exactly what I think is right. And I read something very similar in your post too. So, I mean, are you that person from the very beginning, or again, you know, over time, you decided to hell with the world?
Well, I'm a trained salesperson. It's the only job that I've ever had, sales and partnerships and all those things. And I remember my first job, I was selling real estate, and this guy in my office, he was so good at selling real estate, but I wasn't very good. And he told me that, you know, I have to detach myself from the sale. I have to detach myself emotionally from the customer. And like when they say no to the house, they're not saying no to me as a person. They're saying no to the transaction. And I mean, of course, like everybody tells you like, I don't want to buy this from you, or this is not going to work. The thing you're doing is stupid. Like, how can you not take that personally? But it's about how long you let that impact you. You need to set an expiry on your feelings so that you can move forward. Your feelings are real. You should embrace them, right? You should allow that to impact you, you know, I don't know, 15 minutes, an hour, a day, but you need to put an expiry to it, because otherwise you're never going to move forward. Not everybody is going to agree with what you're doing. Even the most successful people in the world, like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, these people are changing the world. Like not everybody agrees with what they're doing so much that they create these conspiracy theories around how these guys live their lives to bring them down. Right. And like, and these are some of the smartest people in the world doing the biggest things. Right. So I had to, I think over the years, train myself to emotionally detach myself from the work, but it's not easy. Right. And it's still like, it still irks me when someone's like, I don't know what this is good for. Like, who would use eWebinar? It's never going to be a big business. And you kind of, you wonder, right? But you also, I think, need to, as an entrepreneur, be cautiously optimistic, right? When someone's saying something, you should at least take it into consideration, read between the lines and figure out who, like where that feedback is coming from and determine whether you're going to execute on that or just throw it away. If you ignore everything, then you're too confident. Then you're never going to see the gaps, right? So I think being an entrepreneur is always finding that balance, and that balance between confidence and delusion is actually very fine. And we need a bit of both, right? Like when everyone says no and you really believe it, you need to delude yourself and say, I know what I'm doing, right? So I think that's definitely a trained skill. But you can't be stubborn, right? Because sometimes like you do need feedback for your idea, and sometimes you do need to change. Yeah. And sometimes you do need to end something and say no to something in order to find the next thing, right? Continuously hitting yourself, like bang your head against the wall with no result just because you believe this is right is also not the right thing to do, right? Like, so how do you know that you're doing the right thing? Well, people are paying you for it. If you're building a business, people are paying attention to you. Your audience is growing. They're staying. They're not leaving. People are paying you. They're paying you more money. Like, these are validation points that you shouldn't ignore. But if you're working on the same thing for years and no one's paying you anything and you have no audience, well, maybe you have to listen to somebody.
Yeah. Maybe you need to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That was very valuable. But tell me, the more that I'm talking to you, I find so much wisdom. How is this? Like, from where did you get so much wisdom? Everything is so bang on. It's so
from desperation. Just constantly being so desperate. Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, I look young, but I'm turning 40 next month. So I've had a lot of years of experience. I had my first job pretty late. I had my first job when I was 19 or 20. Most people were already working, kind of in their teens, and like I wasn't allowed to work because my parents wanted me to focus on my schoolwork. So I already consider myself a late bloomer. But I surround myself with a lot of founder friends. I used to read a lot of books, a lot of business books, a lot of sales books. I've had tons of sales trainings, lots of great coaches, and it's just a lot of trial and error. And also I think willingness to change, right? I think one of my best traits is if something doesn't work, I can change my mind immediately.
Wow.
Like if there's a feeling that stops me from being happy or productive, I can flip that. Like if once I recognize that, I can flip that around immediately. Like I don't dwell on things. So I think that is one thing that keeps me learning and keeps things interesting.
Wow. So how do your parents feel about you now?
They no longer bug me about being a founder. I remember when I sold my last startup, and this is coming from people who have no idea what a startup is. Like, I don't even because they live in Hong Kong and, I've lived abroad all my life. So they just don't have a concept of what it took to build a startup and what it took to sell it. And I remember telling my dad, oh, I sold the company. And instead of congratulations, he was like, so exactly how much money are you going to have in your bank account?
So
that is the only thing he cared about. Yeah, that's the only thing he cared about. But I think it came from a place of, let me know I don't have to worry about you anymore. And that was the measure of success or relief that he knew. I mean, now I think they just kind of let me do my own thing. They never ask about it. They don't understand it. And it's just not even a topic. It's not a topic of conversation. But the good thing is they know I have no debts. They don't have to worry about me. I have a life partner now, so they don't even have to worry about that part. So I think in their eyes, they're like, okay, finally I can chill.
So is marriage still an important part back home?
I mean, originally, no. But I am married, but I don't talk about it because actually David and he's actually also my co-founder. He's my CTO. we were like a COVID marriage. Like we were already together for years. And when everything shut down, between us, we had 4 different passports, but we couldn't travel to each other's countries unless we were married. And we didn't know how strict the borders would be if we couldn't produce a marriage certificate. So we just had a conversation about what it meant to be married. He'd already been married once. He got divorced. He has 2 kids with his ex. And we realized that, like, how ridiculous is it that the law recognizes marriages, but not relationships? So then we realized if we got married, then a lot of things would become more convenient. So we made a very adult decision in, I think, 2020 to get married, but it still doesn't feel like, I am married, because it's it wasn't a big deal. It never was for me. I think relationships and commitment should be a feeling, not a contract.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like unromantic when people get married because they feel like it's the next phase of their life. So that never happened to me because I had a startup. I was married to my startup, and that was enough.
Oh, okay. That was sweet. Okay, Melissa, this is a second act podcast. And of course, the question that what is your second act, which you've partially handled in the beginning, but tell me in detail, what's your second act?
Yeah, so I think that word means 2 things to me. I mean, while ewebinar is my 3rd company, it is in a completely new industry. So that was hard. Spending and before I spent 10 years in real estate technology, I also worked in the real estate industry for like 2 or 3 years in my 20s. So real estate was a very big part of my career, almost all of my career before ewebinar. So coming into a new type of company, needing to make new contacts, figuring out how to grow a company, not from conferences, but 100% through the internet, like not a sales-led company, but really a marketing-led company, completely different thing.
Yeah.
We still don't have the hang of it, but I don't think anybody does. I think everyone's just trying their best and learning new things. And especially when the world's changing so fast, like what you knew in marketing last year is just not going to apply this year. So, that I think is, from a career perspective, I think that is my biggest, second act. But that word also means another thing to me, which I've kind of touched on, is before ewebinar, my entire life was work harder, work more. You need to make it. You need to be financially free. You need to be comfortable. And that was what I woke up for, was work and making more money. But also the fact that, like, in my previous company, it just wasn't a great business. It was an okay business. So it was a business in a very small market. So I had to fight for every single deal. So we had good revenue, but I was never able to pay myself very much. So in a way, I was always struggling in some way, even though the company was okay successful. I personally was not successful, and I was never comfortable. So I never had the opportunity to just relax, right? I worked every weekend. I worked every evening, every single day. I never had holidays.
Yeah.
And coming into this company, because I have some financial freedom, but I also picked a product that is applicable across all industries, all geographies, no longer limited to a tiny market. And I was able to now pick a more experienced team of people to work with. I'm able to now live a life where I can put my life first and my work behind it.
So nice.
So I think that is really my biggest second act, is intentionally choosing a career that fits into my life versus the other way around. And the best example is, like, I think a lot of people, myself included, choose a company or choose a career because they were educated in it or they had experience in it. I chose real estate tech because I was in real estate. Did I like the industry? Not particularly. I ended up actually hating it because I had to sell software to real estate agents, which is the hardest thing in the world because they don't spend money on technology. They spend money on bottles of wine for their clients.
Yes.
And like trying to get them to buy software, it was like prying candy from a baby's hand, but I did it for 10 years. And that industry is sold through conferences and events. And I hated going to conferences and events. I didn't want to be bounded by my customers' schedules. So coming to this business, I made a list of things that would make me happy first. So for example, I didn't want to go to any more live events. I didn't want to do any more live demos or any live training. So I needed a product that could be sold 100% through the internet. So the price point had to be low, right? So I made a list of all these things that I have to have. And then eWebinar was the idea, not just the idea that kept coming back to me, but that was the idea that fit into my list of non-negotiables.
Wow.
So now, even though things are hard, I know that at least the way I live my life is something that I derive happiness from, because I don't do any more conferences. I don't meet people for networking. I don't do any live trainings anymore. Right. So like, to the point where someone's like, oh, you're going to Chicago. I have a friend. Do you want to meet them? They're in technology. I'm like, no. Like, all my time is spent on my life and socializing with my friends. I don't need to socialize with people in my work life. So I'm just way more intentional nowadays about what makes me happy, and work actually takes a backseat.
No, I'm getting very, very inspired listening to this. And I'm, in my mind, I'm just churning it out. So what do I need to do? Because I need to do exactly this, but I don't know how.
Just make a list of non-negotiables and start there.
Yeah.
I think I'm a believer that anybody can design the life they want to live, but you have to know what the rules are. It's not just like, oh, I want to travel. No, be very, very intentional about what your non-negotiables are, and then design a life around that. Because if you don't know what your non-negotiables are, you don't know whether to say yes or no to something when an opportunity comes around, right? So if you know exactly how you want to live your life, then every decision becomes a very easy yes or no.
But I think it's an entrepreneur trap when, supposing me, like podcasting, I just love it. But I'm not able to monetize it to an extent that it's serving me or, feeding me or running my house. So then an opportunity comes in to do something like a webinar, which pays you. So you say, yes to the webinar. Then tomorrow, there is something else which comes up. You say, yeah, I think that makes sense too. So in between, you're thinning yourself, you're spreading very, very thin. You are spending your time in many, many things because you don't know which one will serve you. And this is exactly what I love, but it's not still serving me. And I don't know how to make it like a technology platform which can, because that's the only way to scale it up. So I'm just saying there are entrepreneurs I know like me who are stuck in this race of like saying, what should I say no to? And because I don't know what.
But it's all trial and error, right? Like the only reason I was able to come up with that list was because I had 10 years of doing stuff I didn't like. But, if something pays you, you're going to like doing it. So you leave that off the list.
Yeah.
and you keep doing that.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're like, oh, I love doing podcasting, but I absolutely hate doing webinars and I don't want to be on video, then you shouldn't do that. Yeah. I think there's a degree of hate too, right? Like it's like on a degree of 0 to 10, how much do you hate this thing? But if it's like a 7 and up, then you definitely shouldn't do it. But sometimes you're right. Like you just have to do what it takes to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. But thanks for sharing, because I think your candid approach of like speaking it out and not really mincing any words, I just love, to be honest. You're not like trying to just, just say the right things. You're just saying the right thing. So thank you for doing that, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm not very politically correct because I don't have any investors.
Well, yeah, I can say whatever I should ask you this question. In this world of investors and everybody getting the funding, I know that this question is not apt for you, that are you feeling left out? But I know that a lot of entrepreneurs feel left out. What do you have to tell them?
Anytime I read about like a funding announcement or like someone tells me they raise money, my first thought is like, rest in peace. I am so happy to not join that camp. Like I started a business to have freedom and to be my own boss. I didn't start a business to invite a board member to be my boss. Yeah. So I am very, very happy to be calling all of my shots and living exactly how I want to and building the product exactly as I want to. Like I can shut down the business tomorrow, or I can change what the product is tomorrow and nobody has to approve it. And for me, there is no amount of money you can pay me to take that away. Yeah. If somebody wants to give me 10 million for 10% of my business and not take a board seat, I would absolutely take that. But there is no investor like that out there. Yeah, nobody's giving me that.
All right. It's so much fun talking to you. And I think there is so much that came out for me personally. And I'm going to think about what we spoke about to design my life intentionally as well. So thanks, Marisa. But there are a few rapid fire questions before you go. So
Okay.
see how you handle them. Okay. So if you had a magic wand,
hmm
yeah, complete.
If I had a magic wand, what would I do?
Yeah.
Oh, I would give myself $1 billion.
And if you had $1 billion,
I would sell ewebinar today
and
and
if you
retire.
sold the ewebinar today, just manifesting.
Wow, it just keeps going. I'm kind of getting the feel for this game. I would book a flight somewhere fun with 10 people that I really like.
Oh, so nice. Okay, so one thing that you want to leave us with, though you have given a lot today from your experiences, but still, before you go, what would you like to tell?
Okay. Outside of come and check out our website, ewebinar.com. I would say, just know that you can always do what you love. Like you can always make a change. I think a lot of people feel stuck in their roles or in their companies or in their life. You are not a tree. We are the consequence of our decisions. Like if you want to make a change, the best day is today.
Brilliant. Thank you for leaving us with that note, Melissa. And may you get your financial freedom till the point that you want and lead your life the way that you want and go and enjoy with your friends, with the 10 best people that you like in a chartered flight somewhere in a beautiful place. So
Thank you.
thank you for spending this time with me. It was amazing. That I will always keep this conversation very special.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye. So this is yet another incredible episode of Discover Your Second Act. I'm hoping that as me, you are feeling very, very excited, enthusiastic, and learned about all the nuggets that came out. So follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and of course, until next time, keep discovering